Nyxari Operative's shadow destroys on contact. Human specialist shadow makes it sway. The hush in the Obsidian Reach complex was suffocating, pressing down on every breath and thought. Each footstep echoed with the weight of unspoken fears, the air tinged with the sharp tang of ionized metal, and something subtler, more primal, a warning almost, that something unnatural lurked just ahead. Ethan walked behind Director Malkarin, the lines of tension in the older man's shoulders drawn tight as cabling. Malkarin's tone was clipped and wary, as if even words risked awakening the danger they contained. "She killed 4," Malkarin said without preamble. His hand hovered over the console at his hip, knuckles pale. "4 of our best. They didn't even have time to scream. You'll see what's left of them in the after-action reports, if you want to see it." He stopped at a reinforced viewport, looking back at Ethan, as if measuring the man's nerve. "We think it's her shadow. It isn't normal. It moves before she does. It feeds. Within 3 meters, you're dead before you know you've made a mistake." Ethan nodded once, not trusting his voice. He watched the blue-white glare of the corridor lights ripple across the armored blast door ahead. He could feel his own shadow at his heels, subtle, diffuse, trailing just a fraction behind his motions, never quite behaving as a shadow should. It was this oddity that had drawn the Coalition's notice in the first place, that had landed him here instead of exiled, or worse. Malkarin's gaze flicked to Ethan's feet. "They say your shadow calms the volatile. That's why you're here. The only reason we're not already opening her up like a data drive." "I need to be alone with her," Ethan said, his voice calm but unyielding. "No interference from the booth, no weapons. If I say the word, you end it. But until then, I control the pace." The director hesitated, the silence stretching into the hum of the corridor's automated systems. "You have 10 hours. After that, we dissect. The board won't be patient." Ethan inclined his head. "That's all I ask." At the threshold, 2 guards in obsidian black exosuits gripped their rifles with white-knuckled anticipation. Tension radiated from them, a wall of apprehension Ethan pushed through without a glance. The guards exchanged wary glances, but neither moved to stop him. Ethan paused before the blast door, feeling the scrutiny of unseen observers from behind mirrored glass and across a dozen camera feeds. He pressed his palm to the access plate. The door responded with a seismic shudder, sliding aside in increments, each inch a challenge. The cell was more like a vault, bare, cold, and silent, but for the steady breath of recycled air. In its center, Siriel sat cross-legged on a smooth alloy platform, her posture impeccable, her hands resting open on her knees. Her iridescent skin shimmered with an ethereal glow, a blue-violet radiance that flickered in time with her slow, deliberate breaths. A single braid, silver-white and impossibly smooth, fell to mid-back, framing a face of high cheekbones, sharp jaw, and lips pressed in a line of regal composure. Her eyes, solid violet and without pupils, fixed on Ethan the moment he entered. But it was her shadow that commanded his attention, a living patch of utter darkness, roiling and surging beneath her like a tide of black ink. The edges blurred, sometimes flickering outward in thin, questing tendrils. The air between them seemed colder, heavier, where the shadow touched it. Ethan stepped forward, his boots scraping softly against the floor. The shadow flared, a silent snarl, its edges leaping to meet him with predatory hunger. Ethan stilled, drawing in a slow breath, and let his own shadow slip free. It pooled around his feet, not sharp-edged or menacing, but diffuse and gentle, a haze of twilight instead of a blade of night. The 2 shadows collided just beyond the reach of Siriel's fingers. Instead of the violence Malkarin had promised, there was a sudden, unnatural stillness. Siriel's shadow hesitated, its aggression dampened, as if confused. Ethan's shadow, soft and enveloping, began to move in sync with the other, tracing gentle arcs that echoed Siriel's posture. Siriel's lips parted, surprise flitting across her face before she masked it with practiced control. For the first time, she shifted, her regal poise breaking under the weight of curiosity. She looked at Ethan, not with the icy disdain of a captive facing her captor, but with genuine interest, tinged with caution. "You are not afraid?" Her voice was low, melodious, resonating in the metal chamber. "I'm not here to fear you," Ethan answered, his tone level. "I'm here to understand." Her gaze narrowed. "Many have tried. They failed. I am not many." He moved to stand within the circle of her influence, feeling the prickling cold of her shadow, the hungry curiosity in its depths. "Do you know why your shadow kills?" She hesitated, the question catching her off guard. "It is my weapon, my curse. I was forged to use it." Ethan knelt, his shadow mingling more fully with hers. A tremor passed through the darkness, a silent exchange of sensation. He felt, for an instant, a memory that was not his own, training on a world of black stone, instructors barking orders, fear twisting in her chest, solitude, pain. The moment her shadow awoke, and the horror it brought. He met her gaze and projected calm, an invitation to trust. He offered her a memory of his own, standing with his mother on a high plateau, the world stretching out in wild, beautiful silence, wind in his hair, auroras dancing overhead, a wash of green and violet painting the sky, the feeling of absolute belonging, of being safe, even in the vastness. Siriel's posture softened, her hands curling into loose fists. A single luminous tear slid down her cheek, tracing a glowing path across iridescent skin. Her voice, when it came, was no longer a weapon, but a question, vulnerable and almost fragile. "Why do you show me this?" "Because peace is possible," Ethan replied, "even for us." For the first time, the predatory edge faded from her shadow, its movements echoing the gentle rhythm of Ethan's own. In that moment, the observers saw only two figures sitting in silence, shadows intermingled. But within that silence, two captives, one forged by fear, the other by wonder, began to unravel each other, moment by moment, forging a bridge where none had dared before. Days blurred into a quiet, intimate ritual. Each morning, Ethan entered the containment cell, passed through the security gauntlet with the same measured calm, and took his place across from Siriel. The blast door sealed behind him, the final echo of the outside world replaced by the hush of recycled air and the low thrum of containment fields. Within these walls, time seemed to pool and eddy, the strict schedules and surveillance of the Obsidian Reach receding until only their shared silence remained. Their sessions began wordlessly. Ethan would lower himself onto the smooth alloy floor, folding his legs to mirror Siriel's pose. Their eyes would meet, searching, questioning, but saying little. It was not words that passed between them, but something deeper, a communion that unfurled through the mingling of their shadows. The darkness at Siriel's feet, once sharp and voracious, now greeted Ethan's gentle haze with a cautious caress. Their silhouettes stretched and entwined, and in that merging, memories passed like whispered secrets. Ethan learned her world in fragments. The Nyxari matriarchs loomed in her mind, stern figures clad in obsidian regalia, eyes as cold and implacable as the void between stars. Through Siriel's memories, he glimpsed rituals of discipline, the rigid hierarchies that had made her both revered and feared. He saw her as a child, isolated by her gift, her touch forbidden, her laughter stifled in the shadow of elders who saw only a weapon. In one memory, she stood alone atop a glassy plateau, the sky bleeding with the auroras of her homeworld, longing for warmth she could not name. She, in turn, explored his life in colors softer and warmer than she had ever known. She witnessed the raucous laughter of Ethan's friends gathered around a battered table, the scents and flavors of home-cooked meals in cramped, sunlit kitchens. She tasted his freedom and his simple joys, a field of wildflowers beneath a bright sun, the ache of grief after losing his father, the resilience it had forced upon him. Siriel absorbed these fragments hungrily, her silence broken only by the occasional flicker of emotion, an uplift of her lips, a shiver in her luminous gaze. One afternoon, as the shadows curled around them, Ethan spoke for the first time in hours. "What do you miss most?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant. Siriel considered, violet eyes searching the interplay of light and dark on the floor. "Touch," she admitted. "Not as a weapon, as comfort. My own people fear me." Her fingers flexed unconsciously, as if reaching for something remembered. "I have been alone, even among my own." He offered her a memory, a sun-warmed hand squeezing his in reassurance, the warmth of belonging. She received it, a sigh trembling on her lips, her gratitude silent but deep. In return, she shared the ache of her isolation, the bitterness of betrayal by those who were meant to protect her. Their shadow link grew into a deep intimacy, beyond words or touch. Ethan found himself anticipating her emotional tides, the sudden flares of fear, the lingering sorrow, and responded by projecting steady calm, a blanket of peace that soothed the darkness within her. He became her anchor, her reference point. And as their sessions wore on, Sirael learned to mirror his steadiness, returning it with glimmers of hope and trust. On the third day, as he closed his eyes, she sent him a pulse of soundless music, notes woven from memory, the haunting melody of a Nyxari lullaby. It was strange and beautiful, filled with longing. Ethan listened, awash in the sensation, and answered with a memory of rain tapping on window glass, a tune hummed by his mother as she worked. Their differences, once vast as galaxies, became the threads of an intricate tapestry. One morning, Sirael gave him her vision of the world. He felt it first, a prickle of cold along his spine, the sense of eyes upon him. He saw, through her perception, the suspicion that clung to her like a second skin. The way guards watched from behind mirrored glass, the clinical detachment of the medics, the director's thinly veiled contempt. And then, warmth, his presence, breaking through, the only light in the oppressive gloom. She let him feel the relief she felt when he entered the room, the way his shadow dulled the ache of solitude. He opened his eyes, found her watching him with unguarded vulnerability. "You trust me," he said quietly. "I must," she replied. "You are the only one who sees me as more than a threat." They held each other's gaze for a long moment. The air hummed with the energy of things unspoken, a recognition of the bridge that now spanned the chasm between them. By the fifth session, the unspoken understanding between them had ripened into something unbreakable. Ethan sensed a shift in the air as soon as he entered. Cyril's posture was more upright, her eyes alive with a new intensity. Their shadows met, interlaced not only with curiosity and comfort, but also with purpose. She reached for him, not physically, but through the silent current of their connection. She projected a memory so vivid, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The world around them faded, replaced by a rain-soaked alley on a distant outpost. Cyril, cloaked and desperate, handed a crystal the size of a thumbnail to a human contact. Ethan saw the blue-white gleam of the data crystal, felt the urgent pressure of the exchange. With it came knowledge, encrypted files, the digital heartbeat of a conspiracy. The memory expanded, unfurling in Ethan's mind, snatches of whispered dialogue, the cold fear of discovery, the face of the man who accepted the crystal. Commodore Hadron, the architect of the Obsidian Reach, the one who had ordered Cyril's capture. The files exposed a scheme to ignite war across the sector, not in defense, but for profit. Military contracts, resource claims, power consolidated through bloodshed. Siriel's shadow trembled, and Ethan felt her conviction. My mission was not to kill for the Nyxari. I was sent to stop him, to reveal the truth. They turned my capture into a burial. He looked at her, realization dawning like a sunrise after a long night. They wanted you silenced. She nodded. And you were made my jailer, not by choice, by design. A cold wave of betrayal swept through him as he relived their past days in a new light. The warmth he had offered, the trust he had built, all weaponized by those in power to keep them both in check. He clenched his fists, jaw tight. We've both been played. The warning light above the door flashed, bathing the cell in urgent red. The session's end approached. Siriel's shadow recoiled, its calm replaced by tension as if bracing for an attack, or... The spell between them broke, but only at the surface. Their eyes met in desperate understanding, the message between them clear as a spoken vow. Ethan rose slowly, every movement deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers. "This isn't over," he said, voice low. Siriel inclined her head, her expression fierce and resolute. "I am trusting you, Ethan." As the blast door opened and the guards' voices echoed down the corridor, their shadows separated, pulling reluctantly apart. But something fundamental had shifted. When Ethan stepped into the corridor, he did not feel like her captor anymore. He moved with new purpose, the weight of conspiracy and fragile hope settling onto his shoulders. He was not leaving as her interrogator. He left as her future ally, and the fate of more than one world now depended on the bridge they had built in secret. The next hours were torment for Ethan. The walls of his quarters pressed in with suffocating certainty, the hum of the facility's life support systems a mocking heartbeat in the dark. He sat at his terminal, fingers hovering over the keys, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep and the weight of his decision. Every word he typed was a lie. Fabricated updates, progress reports designed to pacify the director and buy Siriel precious hours. He claimed breakthroughs in psychological profiling, promised imminent compliance, all the while replaying the memory Siriel had given him. Commodore Hadron's face, the damning data crystal, the truth buried beneath layers of sanctioned deceit. He submitted the latest falsified report, and moments later, Director Malkarin's response arrived. The message was cold and bureaucratic, offering neither praise nor patience. Siriel was scheduled for reassignment at dawn, a euphemism everyone at Obsidian Reach understood. It meant erasure, a body never recovered, a name struck from the records. Ethan stared at the words until they blurred. Alone in the half-light, he felt the fault lines inside him split further, one side tugging him toward loyalty, the other toward the defiant spark Siriel had kindled in him. He replayed her memories, her trust, the hope that had flickered in her eyes. Could he let that be extinguished? Could he go back to the man who followed orders, blind to the blood on his hands? He chose her. The clock on his wall glowed 2 a.m. The station slumbered, the security grid rotating into its slowest patrol. Ethan dressed in silent haste, blending into the facility's shadowed angles as he moved. In the hallways, the only witnesses were surveillance cameras, and Ethan's shadow, pulsing with quiet determination, drifted a half-step behind him. He reached the security checkpoint outside Siriel's cell. The lone guard, slouched and bored, barely looked up. Ethan exhaled, letting his shadow swell outward, a gentle wave of tranquility, a warm shroud that settled over the guard's consciousness. The man's eyes glazed, his weapon lowering as his body slumped into a peaceful, dreamless sleep. Ethan caught him, eased him to the floor, and palmed the security override. Inside, Siriel was already awake, coiled in a crouch, her shadow writhing like a caged storm. The instant the door opened, her eyes flashed violet, and her darkness surged in readiness. But before she could strike, Ethan projected a silent message, routes mapped in his mind, codes for every lock, a memory of the hangar's hidden shuttle. Her shadow stilled, then twined with his, an answer as fierce as it was intimate. No words passed between them. They were no longer prisoner and warden. They were co-conspirators, bound by trust. They moved as one. Ethan led, steps measured and unhurried, his shadow brushing ahead to sense the tremors of approaching patrols. He held a hand behind him, palm open. Sirael's fingers brushed his for the briefest moment, then withdrew, her presence a silent promise at his back. Every intersection was a test of nerve, every corridor a gauntlet. Sirael dispatched threats with chilling precision. Her shadow lashed out, a blade of void that enveloped cameras and sensors, cutting sight and sound. A patrolling technician rounded a corner. Sirael's darkness slipped across his face, and he crumpled, breath shallow, unharmed but lost in dreamless sleep. Their teamwork was wordless, flawless, a ballet choreographed by necessity. At the central elevator shaft, Ethan scanned his ident chip, overriding the next layer of security. The elevator doors slid open with a sigh, and they slipped inside, shadows blending in the cramped space. As the elevator descended, Sirael turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're risking everything." He met her gaze, resolve shining in his tired eyes. "So are you." She offered a fleeting smile, the first he had ever seen from her, then pressed her back to the wall as the doors opened on the lower level. The main junction was their greatest test. Floodlights blazed above a raised platform, illuminating 3 elite guards, exosuits gleaming like beetle shells. They blocked the only path to Dock 9, weapons leveled. Ethan drew Sirael to the shadows, his heart hammering. "They'll see us on infrared," he murmured. Sirael's lips curled in a wry, dangerous smile. "My shadow is colder than space." She closed her eyes, and her darkness crept up the walls and across the ceiling, snuffing out the heat signatures, turning the air itself icy. The guards hesitated, confused as their targeting visors flickered. Sirael's shadow struck from above, silent, precise, a void that snatched away consciousness and left the bodies slumped where they stood. No alarm sounded. The silence that followed was deeper, more ominous. They pressed on, reaching the maintenance shaft that led directly to Dock 9. But the way was blocked. Director Malkoran stood at the mouth of the corridor, weapon drawn, flanked by a squad of armored guards. His expression was one of bitter resignation, as if this was the end he had always foreseen. "Ethan, stop where you are," Malkoran barked, his weapon trained on Ethan's chest. "You don't have to do this. Surrender now. You can still walk away." Ethan's body tensed. He glanced at Sirael, whose eyes glowed with defiance. In that heartbeat, the memory of every shared moment, her pain, her trust, her silent plea, flooded through him. He knew his answer. He fired first. The corridor erupted in chaos. Blaster fire streaked through the gloom, ricocheting off metal walls, filling the air with ozone and the stink of scorched alloy. Ethan ducked behind a crate, returning fire, buying Sirael precious seconds. Sirael stepped into the hail of energy bolts, her shadow expanding into a living shield. The blasts vanished into its depths, their power devoured by the void. She moved with deadly grace, her voice ringing above the din. "He is under my protection." Her words struck the guards with the force of a commandment, freezing some in place, sowing doubt among the others. A guard broke from cover, weapon raised, targeting Sirael's exposed flank. Ethan saw the threat, threw himself into the line of fire. The blast hit him square in the side, a burst of white-hot agony that stole his breath and dropped him to his knees. Sirael's cry echoed through the corridor, raw and anguished. "Ethan!" Her shadow exploded outward, no longer a shield, but a torrent. It engulfed the guards, slipping into their minds, overwhelming their senses with terror and darkness. The squad collapsed, writhing or stunned, weapons clattering from limp hands. Only Director Malkorin remained, face twisted in rage and desperation. He raised his weapon, aiming for Sirael. "You're a monster! You don't belong in this world!" Before he could fire, Sirael's shadow pierced his chest, a lance of absolute darkness. Malkorin gasped, frozen mid-curse, his body dissolving into nothing, first flesh, then bone, then memory itself, until only empty air and a faint shimmer of lost light remained. The corridor fell silent. The bodies of the fallen guards lay sprawled, but there was no time for grief or reckoning. Ethan struggled to his feet, clutching his side, pain radiating through him. Sirael reached for him, her hands trembling but gentle, her shadow curling protectively around them both. The way to Dock 9 was clear. Together, battered and changed, they stepped into the darkness beyond the ruined checkpoint, leaving behind the world that had made them captor and captive, and forging onward as something new, partners, bound by shadow and by choice. Sirael rushed to Ethan's side, her breath ragged and hands trembling as she pressed them over his wound. The corridor behind them was a tangle of chaos and silence, the only sound Ethan's labored breathing and the distant wail of klaxons. He clung to consciousness, his uniform darkening with blood, one hand reaching out and finding hers in the flickering light. "Shuttle," he managed, voice raw. "We have to go. Now." She nodded once, eyes fierce with purpose. Slipping beneath his arm, she supported his weight, half carrying him through the battered checkpoint and into the hangar's cavernous darkness. Every step was a struggle, a ballet of urgency and desperation, Ethan stumbling, Sirael's strength steadied by something beyond adrenaline. The hangar's shielding groaned overhead as they hurried toward the small scout shuttle, its hull matte black and unmarked, a ghost among the larger official craft. Inside the hatch, Sirael eased Ethan into the co-pilot's seat. He grimaced, sweat beading on his brow, but managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine," he lied. She knelt before him, hands hovering, torn between fear and determination. "You are not fine." Her voice quivered, but her actions were swift. She found a medkit beneath the console and tore it open with trembling fingers. "Hold still." He tried to joke. Wasn't planning on a jog, but the pain made him clench his jaw, breath shallow. She cut away the burned fabric, revealing the angry red wound where energy had scorched his side. Carefully, she cleaned the injury with antiseptic, her touch cool, the pads of her fingers tracing the edge of agony and relief. Her shadow, once a thing of menace, now pooled gently around his boots, sending a soft, questioning pulse, comfort, reassurance, an echo of the connection they'd built. Ethan let his head fall back against the headrest. "Sirael, thank you." She met his gaze, her own eyes shining with emotion. "You saved me first." With the wound cleaned and wrapped, she pressed a hypospray to his neck, flooding his system with painkillers and coagulants. "This will help, but you must rest," she said, voice quiet. He nodded, eyelids fluttering. "We need to get out of here. Can you fly?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I have flown worse." She slid into the pilot's seat, fingers dancing over the controls with unearthly precision. The shuttle's engines purred to life, and she guided them out of the docking cradle, weaving through security protocols with practiced ease. Ethan forced himself upright, activating the navigation systems, plotting random jumps to throw off pursuit. As the stars stretched and bent around them, the shuttle leapt into hyperspace, the familiar weightless sensation pressing them into their seats. Only then did Sirael allow herself to exhale, a tremor of relief rippling through her frame. They drifted in the liminal light of an uncharted nebula, far from any known jump lanes. The nebula's swirling clouds washed the cockpit in pale lavender and gold, casting strange shadows that danced on the bulkheads. Sirael glanced at Ethan, her concern etched into every line of her face. "We are safe, for now." He slumped in the co-pilot's chair, sweat cooling on his brow. "I've been worse," he said, but his voice was weak. She knelt before him again, more tender now that the danger had passed. She peeled away the bandages to check his wound, her movements gentle and precise. "Does this hurt?" she asked, fingertips hovering above his skin. "Not as much as losing you would have," he murmured, meeting her gaze. She blinked, startled, then let a faint, shy smile slip through her usual composure. She dabbed at the edges of the burn with a cool cloth, her other hand steadying his shoulder. "You are reckless," she chided softly, "but brave." Her shadow brushed his boot, pulsing with a warmth that needed no words. He felt it, an offering of comfort, of gratitude, of something deeper that was growing between them. When she finished tending his injury, the adrenaline faded, leaving them both raw and exposed. Sirael rose and gestured toward the shuttle's cramped living quarters behind the cockpit. "You need to rest," she insisted, her tone brooking no argument. Ethan managed a wry grin. "Only if you stay nearby." She hesitated, looking toward the narrow bunk. The space was barely enough for one, but she nodded, unable to resist the pull between them. They retreated together, the air thick with the tension that had haunted their every interaction since the moment their shadows first touched. Ethan lowered himself onto the bunk, groaning as the pain caught him, but he patted the thin mattress beside him. "Please, stay." Sirael paused, the vulnerability in her eyes warring with the memory of a lifetime spent alone. Then she eased down beside him, careful to keep her body just close enough to feel his heat, but not crowd him. Her breathing slowed, her hands folded in her lap. The light from the nebula painted shifting patterns across the walls. Their shadows merged, elongated, swaying together in silent harmony. Sirael watched the interplay, her lips parted in wonder. Ethan turned to her, searching her face. "I didn't know I could miss someone before I met them," he said quietly. She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have never wanted to be close. Not until you." For a long moment, neither moved. The tension between them was electric, an invisible thread pulling them closer. Ethan, exhausted and aching, reached out, his fingers brushing the back of her hand. Her skin was cool, silken, and she shivered at the contact, a shiver of anticipation, not fear. He squeezed her hand gently. "Are you all right?" She nodded, her cheeks flushing with bioluminescent color. "I do not know what this is," she admitted, "but I want to learn." He smiled, relief and longing mingling in his eyes. Slowly their fingers intertwined. Sirael's breath caught, her heart pounding beneath her luminous skin. Ethan leaned in, giving her a chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a hesitant, searching kiss, soft at first, uncertain, then growing deeper as the dam between them finally broke. The kiss grew urgent, hungry, years of isolation and pain pouring out, their shadows on the wall swirling and dancing in passionate unity. They broke apart, breathless. Sirael traced his cheek with trembling fingers. "I have never felt this," she whispered. He pressed his forehead to hers, voice rough. "Neither have I." She kissed him again, slower this time, savoring the newness, the shared vulnerability. Ethan's hand slid to her waist, feeling the heat where her skin shifted from blue-violet to a shimmering iridescence. Her tunic slipped from her shoulder, bearing the luminous contours of her body. He explored the changing colors, tracing glowing patterns with his fingertips, learning the secret language of her touch. Sirael's hands moved over him, hesitant at first, then bolder as she discovered the gentle give of muscle, the warmth of human skin. Each caress was a question and an answer, a building of trust more intimate than anything their shadow link had ever shared. Their shadows on the wall became one, a living tapestry of longing and belonging, swaying with each movement. Sirael gasped as his lips found the hollow of her throat, her fingers curling in his hair. He responded with a reverence that made her shiver anew, every sensation amplified by the knowledge of all they had survived. Their bodies moved in harmony, slow and careful at first, then with growing urgency. Years of loneliness, fear, and hope poured into each touch, each kiss, dissolving every barrier that had once separated them. There was no more captor and captive, only two souls, wounded and brave, finding solace in each other. In the quiet that followed, Sirael rested her head on Ethan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His arm curled around her, holding her close, their shadows still merged on the wall. The nebula's light flickered over their bodies, casting them in shades of silver and violet. This was the true convergence, the union neither had dared hope for. As sleep tugged at their weary minds, Sirael pressed a final kiss to Ethan's lips and whispered, "We are more than what they made us." He smiled, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "We are ourselves, together." Their shadows on the wall danced in silent, passionate harmony, reflecting the truth that had finally set them free. Afterward, they lay entwined in the quiet cocoon of the shuttle's living quarters, the nebula's pale light filtering through the viewport, painting shifting silver and indigo patterns across their skin. Sirael's head rested in the hollow of Ethan's shoulder, her fingers tracing idle, gentle patterns along his chest. Each stroke was a silent question, each answer a wordless comfort. Her shadow, once a harbinger of dread, now lay calm and slender along the wall, almost invisible, no longer a weapon, but a gentle echo of her presence. Ethan exhaled deeply, the pain in his side a distant ache compared to the serenity that wrapped around them. He had never felt this kind of peace, not even on the plateaus of his childhood where auroras danced and the world seemed infinite. Here, with Sirael's breath warm against his skin, he felt anchored, whole. The ache of loss and the adrenaline of escape faded beneath the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. For a while, words seemed unnecessary. They listened to the quiet hum of the shuttle, the distant pulse of the nebula's radiation. Then Sirael broke the silence, her voice soft but edged with the gravity of reality. "The Commodore will never stop hunting us. He can't let either of us live now." Her hand stilled, fingers splayed over his heart. Ethan nodded, his expression hardening. "He knows what you carry, and what I know now. He'll see us both as threats." "Running isn't enough," Sirael murmured, her gaze drifting toward the merged shadows on the wall. "We have to end this, or we'll never be free." Ethan turned on his side, searching her face. "The evidence you showed me, do you still have it?" She nodded, brushing a strand of silver hair from her cheek. "It's encoded in a biocrystal, sealed beneath my skin." She tapped a spot at the base of her throat, just above her collarbone, where a faint blue glow pulsed. "If I die, it will break down. The proof will be lost forever." Ethan considered this, the pieces falling together in his mind. "Then we need to get it out. Not just to one person, to everyone. Broadcast it to the galaxy." Sirael's eyes widened a fraction, hope and fear warring on her face. "How?" "The Coalition controls the comm relays. They'll intercept any signal the moment we try." He thought for a moment, mapping the star charts in his mind, then spoke. "There's a relay on Vesper Station. It's a haven for information traders. If we can reach it, we can upload the crystal's contents to 1,000 independent channels. Someone will listen." Sirael's lips pressed into a thin line. "They'll expect us there. The Commodore's spies haunt Vesper's corridors. We'd never get close." He nodded, acknowledging the risk. "Then we do the unexpected. There's a gas giant on the edge of this sector, Thalos. No one goes near it, too dangerous for most ships. But if we dive into its magnetic field, we can use the interference to mask our signal. We send a burst, encrypted, with instructions for any AI or resistance node to pick it up and copy it. No one will look for us there. Siriel studied him, admiration warming her violet gaze. That is dangerous. He grinned, teasing. Everything worth doing is. She smiled, the expression softening her features. I like the way you think. Her hand drifted down his chest, resting over the steady beat of his heart. The tension shifted, and the conversation drifted to something more fragile, more uncertain. Their future. Ethan traced the curve of her shoulder, letting his thumb follow the luminous lines that shimmered beneath her skin. After this, what happens to us? His voice was quiet, hesitant. We can't go back to what we were. Siriel let the question hang between them, her eyes searching the interplay of their shadows. I do not know, she admitted. For my people, I am already a traitor. For yours, you are a deserter. We have no home left. Ethan felt the weight of her words, the truth of it pressing down on him. Then we find a new one, he said. I want more than just survival. I want to live, not as someone's pawn, but as myself. With you, if you'll have me. Siriel's lips parted, uncertainty flickering across her face. I have never been free, Ethan. I don't know what that means. My whole life, I have been a tool, a weapon. I was not taught to hope. He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing the delicate edge of her jaw. You don't have to know yet. We'll learn together. What do you want, Siriel? Not what they made you for. What do you want? She held his gaze, her breath trembling. For a moment, her old reserve threatened to reassert itself, but then hope sparked in her eyes, raw, untested, but radiant. I want to learn what it means to be free, she said, the words tasting unfamiliar but sweet. Somewhere new, somewhere I can choose who I am, with you. Ethan's heart surged with emotion. He drew her close, pressing his forehead to hers. That's all I want, too. She kissed him then, a kiss that was soft and lingering, a promise rather than a plea. Her hands tangled in his hair, her shadow caressing his along the wall, their silhouettes merged in a single fluid form. The kiss deepened, slow and unhurried, sealing the vow between them. When they parted, breathless, Siriel lay her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as if to shield her from the universe itself. They lay together in silence, the shuttle adrift in the nebula's embrace, the danger of the outside world momentarily suspended. Ethan watched the merged shadow on the wall, its shape a living sigil, a symbol of all they had endured and all they had become. It was not a threat anymore, but a bond, a vow. Siriel traced a lazy circle on his chest, her voice a whisper. Do you think we can really do it? Start over? He squeezed her hand, conviction steady in his voice. We have to try. For us. For everyone Hadron would hurt. She nodded, resolve settling in her gaze. Then let's finish this. They watched their shadows sway together, anchored not by fear, but by hope. The future was uncertain, the risks enormous, but for the first time, neither of them faced it alone. The shuttle floated in the magnetic field of a distant gas giant, its hull shuddering with each surge of ionized particles against the shields. Beyond the cockpit canopy, roiling clouds churned in hues of bronze and indigo, lightning dancing along the planet's bands like the flick of some ancient god's hand. Within, the air was thick with tension, a hush broken only by the steady beep of diagnostics and the low hum of overloaded systems. Ethan's hands moved quickly over the console, sweat beading at his brow despite the chill. Each keystroke was deliberate, the command lines intricate as he prepped the encrypted data burst. The biocrystal, cradled in a sterile case beside the comm array, glowed with an eerie blue light, pulses matching the rhythm of Sirael's heart. She stood at his side, her presence a steadying anchor amid the storm of his nerves. Sirael's gaze swept the readouts, eyes sharp. Coalition sweeps are tightening. We have only minutes, maybe less. I know, Ethan replied, jaw set. Just keep watch. This has to work. He glanced at her, drawing strength from the unwavering trust in her violet eyes. His side still ached from the wound, but adrenaline dulled the pain. He forced himself to focus, threading the broadcast through the planet's magnetic storms, layering the encryption, splicing the signal, bouncing it off a dozen ghost satellites. Sirael placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. You are not alone, Ethan. He offered her a tense smile, then flipped the final switch. Beginning transmission now. The main display flared as the data packet leapt into the void, carving a path through interference and coalition firewalls. Sirael's biocrystal glowed brighter, its secrets spilling out. Hollow recordings, financial trails, codes and names, every facet of Commodore Hadron's betrayal. Ethan watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, each percent another heartbeat closer to freedom. They held their breath as the network map flickered, then stabilized. The data slipped past the Coalition's net, carried by the churning magnetic winds into the galactic dark. Sirael let out a shaky sigh. It's out. Someone will see. Not just someone, Ethan replied. Everyone who matters. The moment was shattered by the shriek of proximity alarms. Warning lights strobed crimson. A tactical overlay bloomed across the viewport. Coalition interceptors, closing fast, their vectors converging with predatory precision. Sirael's expression hardened. They found us sooner than I hoped. Ethan's hands flew over the controls. I need 60 seconds to finish the upload. After that, we're gone. His voice was tight, but his focus was absolute. The shuttle rocked as plasma fire lanced past, close enough to leave the hull vibrating. Outside, enemy vessels closed in, sleek, gunmetal predators, weapons primed. Ethan gritted his teeth, spinning the shuttle away from the planet's shadow, engines screaming in protest. Shields at 40%, Sirael reported, voice calm despite the chaos. Her shadow flickered at her feet, gathering strength, ready to defend. Ethan dodged between clouds of debris, weaving through the magnetic turbulence. Sirael, I need your help. Can you jam their targeting? She nodded, eyes glowing. I will try. Her shadow surged, seeping into the cockpit's circuitry, tendrils of darkness crawling across the controls. Outside, the enemy ship's sensor arrays flickered and dimmed, their lock-on warnings dissolving into static. The comm crackled with the voice of a coalition captain, cold and metallic. Surrender now. Power down and prepare to be boarded. Sirael shot Ethan a wry glance. They are persistent. Not for long, Ethan muttered. He punched the throttle, the shuttle veering hard, skimming the upper atmosphere. Plasma fire raked the aft shields, jolting them in their seats. Sirael's hands hovered over the tactical array. 3 ships. Their formation is closing. Ethan's brow furrowed in concentration. If I can get us into the next cloud bank, we'll have a shot at a clean jump. Sirael's shadow writhed, growing in intensity. I will buy you the time you need. A missile locked onto their tail. Sirael's darkness coiled up the bulkhead and seeped through the ship's skin, radiating outward. The missile's guidance system flickered, then spun wildly off course, detonating harmlessly in the gas giant's upper layers. The shuttle shuddered again as another volley struck the wing. Systems sputtered, warning chimes overlapping. Ethan gripped the yoke, forcing the battered craft into a dive. We're losing power! Sirael's gaze was unflinching. Trust me. He did. He always had. The enemy ships reoriented, preparing for a killing blow. Sirael closed her eyes, summoning every ounce of her strength. Her shadow unfurled, spilling through the shuttle and into the void, wrapping the hull in a sphere of utter darkness. Enemy sensors registered only emptiness, their target blinking out of existence. In the cockpit, time seemed to slow. Ethan and Siriel exchanged a glance. Fear, trust, and love mingling in the space between heartbeats. She reached for his hand, her fingers cool and strong. He squeezed back, their hands entwined over the trembling console. "Now," she whispered. Ethan hit the jump sequence. The shuttle lurched, energy arcing through the cabin as hyperspace tore open before them. Coalition weapons fired blindly, but nothing found its mark. The battered shuttle vanished into the corridor of stars, leaving pursuit floundering in a pocket of empty, turbulent space. Silence fell, complete, profound. The cockpit lights dimmed as the hyperspace field stabilized, the only sound the slow, steady breathing of two survivors. Siriel leaned against Ethan, letting the tension bleed from her body. He ran a shaky hand through his hair, adrenaline still humming in his veins. On the console, the transmission status glowed green. The signal had made it. Across the galactic net, the data unfurled. A viral tide of truth, flooding every channel, every node. Commodore Hadron's conspiracy, his financial manipulations, his plans for war, exposed to the light for all to see. The news feeds would soon be ablaze. The Commodore would fall. The war, so carefully orchestrated, unraveled before it began. Ethan gazed at the stars streaming by, battered but alive. "We did it," he breathed, awe and relief mingling in his voice. Siriel smiled, her eyes gentle and shining. "Together." He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers, feeling her warmth, her strength. Their shadows pooled at their feet, merged in a single swaying form, no longer symbols of fear or violence, but of unity and hope. For a long moment, they sat in silence, watching the endless drift of stars. The shuttle floated through the unknown, charting a course beyond the reach of those who had made them weapons and pawns. They had become fugitives, but in that exile, they found something no prison could ever contain. Ethan broke the silence, his voice soft. "Where do you want to go?" Siriel smiled, her gaze distant and full of promise. "Anywhere, everywhere, as long as it is with you." He laughed, the sound unburdened for the first time in memory. "Then let's see what's out there." Their bond, tempered in darkness, sealed in trust, and forged in love, became their guide through the uncharted night. The silence around them was no longer oppressive, but full of promise, as two shadows danced, side by side, into the endless night. Our story ends here. If you'd like to support us, you can use the Super Thanks button right under the video to leave a tip. It truly helps our team improve the quality of our work. We're grateful to each and every subscriber for being with us. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.